compliance with the Open Public Meetings Law. I wish to state on February 5th, the notice of this workshop meeting of the Upper Township Committee was posted on the official Township Bulletin Board, mailed to the Bay County Gazette, the Atlantic City Press, the Ocean City Sentinel, Ledger, the Herald Times, and filed with the Township Clerk. Tonight's workshop meeting is being video recorded up until the closed session portion of this meeting and will be available on UTTV Channel 97 and on the Upper Township website. Hereby direct this announcement made a part of the minutes of this meeting. We'll forego the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll do that when we start our regular scheduled meeting at 7:30 so that we can get right into the workshop. So I will call on Mr. Coggins to take over and pick up where we left off at the last workshop meeting.
Okay, at the last meeting, what we did was we discussed in general terms. We had an overview of what the needs or requests were for capital. We talked about the overall variance in the budget. What I'd like to do this evening is go through the budget on a line item basis and discuss the actual variances from year to year in the budget by line item. And I've asked Mrs. Spiegel to be so kind as to help walk us through the budget variances. So where we will be starting is on the new budget workshop, the new budget worksheet that was put into your books. We're on page 1 of 12. And I guess we'll be starting out with the operating expenses with the mayor committee.
Sounds good.
Okay, first we have the salaries. That has remained unchanged. The DCRP, you'll see a slight increase DCRP is the alternate program for pension when employees not eligible for pensions. So that as we take on new employees and part-time employees are also enrolled in DCRP. So as we take on new employees, that contribution needs to increase slightly because we do pay 3% of an employee's salary into that. Other expenses that stays the same. Mayor and committee's other expenses have stayed the same from the prior couple of years. Township clerk salary and wages, that just increased slightly. The O&E stays the same. The clerk's expenses cover some other departments as well. They take care of all of the legal advertising and some other purchases throughout the year. Salaries for finance have increased slightly. Audit has remained the same. Computer services has increased.
All right. This is probably where we want to stop, at least for the time being. As we go down through these columns, there is going to be a variance in salaries and wages. The employees of the township did not receive a salary increase last year, and this budget includes a 2% salary increase this year.
That's correct.
For the township employees.
That's correct.
So that variance will be consistent as we go from line to line. As we look at computer services, what we're seeing is this is really our first major variance here. We're looking at, I'm gonna call it $37,000. Mm-hmm. Now let's see if we can walk through the $37,000 change in the budget from last year's appropriation and expenditures, which were actually consistent, and where we are this year.
If you look in your book, the first tab you'll see a computer tab that gives you a breakdown from the department that shows what they're asking for. If you look at the first half, and I'll defer to Paul or even Ed, but when you look at the top half of the computer sheet, those expenses they're asking, those budgetary requests are really what they feel are minimal requests. The bottom half are other extras, let's say, that maybe other departments have asked for, or just other projects that they feel are worthy.
Okay.
So that's what's making up that number in the budget.
some of the items on the lower section, the upgrade to the meeting room cameras, we're having issues. If you remember at the last budget meeting, because of some different issues, we're only running on 2 to 3 cameras at best, and some of the pan tilt zoom one that kind of does some of the extra views currently doesn't work for that operation. So that's why it's also looking at where these cameras are also a lower resolution cameras. Comcast is switching all of the channels over to high definition, where the resolution that the public would be seeing, at least on UTTV 97, would be at a lower quality. So the meeting room cameras would be to upgrade the 4 cameras to a high definition cameras, just to keep up with technology and to replace the ones that aren't functioning. The fire system for the server room, that's something that we initially were looking at just to maintain that system. Currently, there's a fire head water sprinkler in the computer server room, not really compatible with the electronic systems. But when we got the final price for $10,000 to install I'll say the electronic fire system that's compatible with electronics that wouldn't damage it, but still put out a fire. Do we want to spend $10,000 to protect? The 30
Actually, that has been updated, but the cost is far more than $10,000.
For the fire,
For fire system.
upgrade?
Yeah.
So we were just going
Are
to.
they going to tap into our dry system?
No, well, the dry system's still wet. The dry system is only dry because it's not energized with water. No, it was actually to use a special, it's a nitrogen system. It mixes nitrogen with small, droplets, microscopic droplets of water, so that it doesn't damage electronics. But when we've got, initially, the initial quote was $10,000. When the final price came, I think it was up over $27,000.
It was around $25,000.
It didn't seem cost effective to have a system, to install it that was the same cost of the system you're protecting. Now, if the committee still feels that they want to include it, maybe it's something that you want to look at it in the bond section, not to include it in, the capital purchase as opposed to putting it into the, but, we felt that possibly that would be something that we could take out of the budget and look at maybe a future purchase, or, just not look at it at all and just look at the deductible for insurance is going to be less than what the cost and replacement of the equipment. It's more.
Okay, so my understanding would be we're talking about $11,000 for the camera upgrade and $27,000 for the.
Yes.
Well, we just have,
You only have 10.
we just have $10,000 for this upgrade. We don't have the actual price when the quotes did come in. We were, when Paul put together the budget, he was anticipating the cost would be about $10,000. It came in a lot higher. So we only have $10,000 figured in here.
All right, where I'm trying to get to is, the delta of $37,000 from last year's expenditures of $90,000 approximately to the budgeted.
Right. I mean, if you look at that top section is $77,000. That's all the different things that we currently do, or the Township Committee has requested, it be programmed to do. It's emails for all the employees, it's updating all of the security audits, maintenance of the website and the different things, programming of, the daily meetings.
Okay.
And all those kind of things. There's also, you'll see down, it also includes all the software maintenance, the packages that the township has as far as the engineering software, Edmunds software for the financial package. So it includes all of the software packages that we had to pay annual maintenances on.
That part I'm comfortable with. I mean, I understand what your line items are asking for. I think maybe where I'm trying to get is an explanation of the variance. What's different this year from last year that takes us up?
Well, they have the 14,000 for the upgrade of the key fob system too. So those two bottom line items, that have 24,000 right there.
Okay, so that's where we're pulling the variance from?
Yep.
Okay.
And the key fob system, we're looking to need to upgrade that because the key fob system for here at Township Hall and at the community center are it's a computer-based program, runs on Windows 98 computers. Obviously, Windows 98 computers aren't supported anymore.
Right.
The software, the vendor doesn't make the software anymore. They're actually out of business. So we can't get a upgraded software package to run on the new computer systems to be compatible and to talk to the thing. So, we're waiting on borrowed time with those machines. When those Windows 98 machines die, we lose the functionality of the key fob systems here at Township Hall and the community center. When we spoke last week about the cyber lock and doing that keying system for the other doors and locks, I mentioned that system has the capability of incorporating our key fob system into it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would possibly recommend is we could take this out of our normal O&E budget and maybe wrap it into the capital expenditure if we look at doing the cyber lock and do it as a system. We actually have cyber lock coming in, I think, this week to kind of look at all of, we've gotten a budgetary price, but, to kind of put it, for the price of a bond, we wanted to have them come down and really do a true analysis of the township and look at what a harder, more budgetary number would be, including the key fob.
So at this point, the $14,000 is just to upgrade 2 buildings?
Upgrade 2 buildings, yes.
So we could be looking at a substantial amount of money if we're upgrading throughout all of our systems, there are buildings throughout the township?
Correct.
Or we could go to an entirely new system, which would be the key system we're talking about.
Correct.
For a capital project. How much was that for the capital project?
14,000.
No, the key
the
fob,
total,
For some reason, I thought it was
65,000?
56,000.
Yeah, it was over, if we include the key fob system in it, we're looking at $65,000 to $75,000.
Which would
Yikes.
But when you're looking at replacing
it would
keys,
totally
and-
expand our capabilities of securing our facilities that aren't secure right now.
yes. The other items in that, there's, 2 line items in there for sports event taping and special event taping that was requested. There's also a line in there to upgrade the Beach Patrol website, upgrade the sports and recreation web pages for all the various sports and recreational programs. And then there's some OEM projects that have been requested that were not included in the OEM budget. So, that kind of incorporates the rest of that, I'll say, above what we need to do to function for a normal computer budget line item.
Okay.
Paul, on the bottom, we upgrade from reading room cameras, 11.3. But then up in that top line, there's committee meeting cameras at 57.50. So that just, something was forgot to be taken out when we added the 11.3 on the bottom. So it's about halfway down, or a third of the way down.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Yeah, is there an offset there?
Maybe that's what we had earmarked, and then you added the upgrades down at the bottom. I didn't know.
That was a good catch on that.
Sometimes.
Yeah, that could have been a duplicate line item that just carried over. I'm not sure.
Paul, was that what we budgeted for the cost of filming and posting?
No, because that committee meeting edit is up higher in the line item.
You've got cameras at 5,000 and then man hours at 750.
750. All right, well, let me ask you this. If you guys could take a look at that and see if that's an opportunity for, a little bit of budget relief here in that line item. And with that, we'll move on to
Then we move to the finance O&E. That actually has been reduced $2,000 over last year. Tax assessment, again, wages up slightly. Their operating expenses, although they were budgeted for the same amount in 15. We did transfer some money, but in speaking to the tax assessor, there is a $5,000 charge in there that the county is picking up, but there may be, she was concerned that there could be a situation where we would have to pick up a $5,000 charge, so I did include that.
Okay, so that's really the variance in this line under other expenses from 3,000 to 9,500 would be the,
Correct.
Okay.
There may be a cost that the county is picking up that we may have to, so that's why that's increased slightly. The tax map conversion has been a steady line item for the last year or so as we work towards the digital tax maps. Tax collection salaries up slightly. Purchase tax title liens, that remains unchanged. Their operating expenses remain unchanged. Liquidation of tax title liens, that remains unchanged. Legal expenses are up slightly from the prior year. Special litigation expenses are the same. Engineering salary is up slightly. Other expenses, they are actually,
they're down.
yeah, they are down slightly. We did reduce, Paul and I did take a look at the DEP fees line,
Okay.
and we were able to take some money out of there.
And now, while we're still here, I see that we've added $20,000 for smart growth expenses. Now, is that part of what we're doing currently with the review of our COA plan?
I put it in there, even though we did, we accounted for a portion of that expenditure in last year's budget.
Okay.
And we, kind of earmarked that and, kind of have a PO out to cover some of the costs that are ongoing. However, we're in the midst of, we had a meeting last week, so we're not sure what direction and how much effort's gonna be taken on that. We won't know that probably until May, by the time it goes to it. So I'm recommending, with not knowing, we need to at least, we may have to spend some money to get us through that process.
Right, now, what would fall into that bucket of expenses? Would we be talking about, would there be some legal involved in there?
And planner.
And planner.
Probably more so planner. Legal would probably come out of the legal
Legal
line.
expenses, okay.
And that's why special litigation has, I've kind of kept that at the same level because we're not sure what to anticipate with the COA.
Right.
But if we don't need it, and we can use the monies that we already have budgeted, we will. It's, that's why we've separated that out from, it's just dedicated for that purpose, so it won't be utilized for other purposes.
Okay.
Moving on to the top of the next page, the affordable housing, those lines both remain the same. Public information, that remains the same. The UTTV, we typically share some expenses with the school for that. The $1,000 other expenses on public information, that sometimes is used for publications or miscellaneous expenses. Then we move down to EMS. Their salaries, again, slightly increased. Their O&A is slightly increased over last year as well. And if you look, you do have an EMS tab if you wanted to see the breakdown of their expenses.
Okay, we're relatively close there. Our variance is probably right around $6,000. Most of that's accounted for in the change in salaries. Okay.
Then we go to OEM. Their operating expenses are up. They have, again, you have an OEM tab in your notebook that the director has spelled out where he feels his expenses will be. Now, unfortunately, he is not here this evening.
Okay. Barbie, you kind of lost me here on the OEM. We went from public information down to public safety. I saw the first aid organization.
And then emergency management is OEM.
Okay, got it. Okay.
So I don't know if you want to move on from there.
Yeah, it looks like we got about a $13,000 push there, but I know that there are some things that we took out of the budget last year that we talked about rolling through this year, so. Am I correct in that thing?
Yeah, we have to upgrade some of our radio frequency. I know that we're looking between the different dispatch systems that we have in place, e-dispatch, and so it's a matter of keeping up with the new systems, and it's also a matter of keeping up with what Ocean City has so we can merge it in the future. So the OEM budget obviously goes across all parameters. It helps the rescue squad, it helps OEM, it helps the fire stations as well. But these are some of the upgrades that we had to not put in last year because we did cut out some of the things from the budget. But tell you what, with all the storms we seem to be having of late, it's getting put to great use, and I would suggest we keep that in there at this time.
It's been a pretty active little group.
It's like a year hasn't gone by where we haven't used it and, expanded it somehow.
Moving on for crossing guard, that basically remains the same. The regional dispatch is contractual, that went up, but our contract obligations has increased. Municipal court, you'll see salaries have increased because we do have a part-time in there. And their other expenses
So they went down?
Actually,
they went down slightly, but they had some unexpected expenses last year, so we would see a decrease in their operating this year. Public defender remains unchanged, prosecutor basically remains unchanged. Then we get to road department. Salaries actually, with shifting of employees in the departments, their salaries actually went down slightly. Their servicing of roads, the other expenses, that remains unchanged. Their O&E request is just slightly higher over last year.
We did, the original request was 2%, we did drop that down to 1%.
Okay, now
Requested
the-
increase.
So the servicing of the roads, that is beyond the resurfacing of streets that have been identified?
Correct.
This is
just
for
general
potholes?
potholes, general maintenance, signs, all the other various drainage, all the other aspects that we do.
So it's not just surfacing of roads, it's general needs?
Oh, you mean the $15,000 line item?
No,
It's 15.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that $15,000 is, we do small drainage projects. So like one year, we did some upgrades back on New Jersey Avenue and, fixed some swales and put some pipe in the ground. One year we did Catherine Avenue, and where there was a localized low spot, so we put some French drains in to reduce flooding. So it's kind of, we do small projects that our public works can construct and do. Other years we've done a maintenance project where we went around and put stormwater grates on different inlets to prevent debris from getting in the inlets, which helps us not have to do as much cleaning of the inlets.
It looks like our spend on that's been pretty consistent for the past number of years. In fact, we dipped down a little bit in 2012, but even going back as far as, 2010, it was the actual
Wouldn't it
spend.
be better to pull that line up like general maintenance or something? Like, I really don't want to identify surfacing of roads.
We can change the
That's
title.
not for that.
We can change
Because
the
we're
title.
talking about potentially looking at roads that have been identified that may get to a bond. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but, this is such a small amount, I think we should just change the line item, make it a little bit more, drill down to what it's actually doing.
Road maintenance?
Road maintenance.
Is that,
That's fine.
okay,
Okay.
we can do that. You ready to move on?
Yeah, can we talk a little bit about the miscellaneous and other expenses? Understanding that, between the first iteration of the budget last week and where we are now, we've dropped down about 1%. How in-depth did we get to looking at this budget for non-recurring expenses? Such as, my example last week of the automated arm for the side load truck.
Well, that's not in, that's, in this one, we did do a major repair to a backhoe. But, there again, those kind of things, if we didn't do that emergency repair to the backhoe, we probably would have bought 4 more loads of salt to put in the salt barn. So, that's where a lot of the items go. We did look at the items, and most of them were fairly consistent from when you looked at 2014 to 2015 as far as, what our electric bills were for the various buildings, what we spent on cold patching and the different parts and repairs. Some of it is a little hard to itemize from year to year because in previous years, the accounting, a lot of times when they put the invoices in, they put it in under miscellaneous, so we didn't have a true line item by line item accounting of those items. So we got better this year in carving out how much money is posted into miscellaneous. But just looking overall, that's what we're looking at doing.
Well, let's kind of talk about that. Where are we in the transition of accounting from the miscellaneous catch-all to the actual line item accounting of certain expenses?
We cut over half of the amount. In 2014, we accounted for just over $100,000 in miscellaneous.
Okay.
And this year, we dropped it down to $58,000 to have a truer.
All right, so we're moving towards better budgeting in terms of
Yes.
not necessarily going to a zero-based budget, but actually looking at individual line items as we build our budget.
Yes.
Paul, we're talking like on miscellaneous, like seal-coated parking area, Conwell Park and that stuff, does that go in this area or is it
No.
going in a separate line item?
Seal coating would go in, that's a capital project, that's a capital thing, so that wouldn't show up there.
Okay.
Ready to move on, John?
Yes.
Okay. Recycling, again, salaries, just a slight increase. Their expenses, other expenses have remained the same. Garbage and trash, again, tipping fees have remained the same. Their operating expenses remain the same as well.
Though I should note the tipping fees, the county MUA did raise their rates just around 2%. So, we're holding the line there. When we looked at the volume of trash from last year to this year, our volume of trash, or the weight of trash dropped. So that's one reason why we haven't increased the amount to go into tipping, because with the newer carts, the volume is less because the containers keep it drier throughout the year, so we're not paying for water weight when we take it to the landfill.
Now, are you also noticing in your stats, and not to get too far off the topic, but are we seeing an increase in recycling tonnages with the larger carts?
We are seeing some, not what I had anticipated generally, but I haven't had time to really sit with the recycling coordinator and fine tune and narrow down where we could pick up some recycling percentage as far as just general household collection. But I think, we do see a slight increase in rates But it's difficult to look at recycling rates as a percentage because, as you know, the volume or the weight of the recycled material is dropping so much, and people aren't buying as many newspapers and magazines because there's so much online. So, as much as people are reducing, it hurts the bottom line of looking at your
You're not
your
exactly
rates.
looking at apples and apples.
Correct.
Yeah, size of packaging is smaller.
Right, but when you look at the weights and the tonnages, we are seeing some increase in recycling and decreasing of the tonnage of trash.
Okay.
Next, the public buildings and grounds. Again, we had shifted some employees around, so that's why the differential in the salary and wage line. Other expenses, from our actual expenditures in 2015, it's decreased slightly, but we do see this line increase from year to year. I mean, it just seems like there's it's our grounds, it's our buildings, so this line sometimes has quite a few expenses charged to it. The next line is gypsy moths. We haven't seen that for quite some time, but we do have recommendation to spray this year for a small portion, so we do see that $5,000 in there for that.
If you actually look at way out at 2009,
Yeah, that was the
Yeah, well, that was
last
my
one.
if you see
next-
that appropriation, that's when gypsy moths are bad, that was a low year. Actually, if you looked at those previous 3 years to that, the number got up over $100,000, and we actually had to do, and actually some of this money may be granted. The state applies for a federal grant, so we may get some of that money back. There were years where the state did not get any grant money and did not want to pay for gypsy moth spraying or do a program, and we did it solely on our own. So
That's actually where I was leading with my next question. And as much as I like to be somewhat prudent with budgeting funds, do we have enough budgeted in that line item? And
Yes.
reason being is we had a discussion about gypsy moths probably less than 2 months ago. And we're talking about that there may be some issues this year.
And that's where that number came from. We have an estimated amount per acre, and we have a number of acres that are recommended to be sprayed, so that's where that number comes from.
But in the
Directly from that.
in the event that, for whatever reason, some unidentified areas aren't included in that, I mean, we're based on what the state has told us,
That's correct.
but if there is a potential for some other areas that may require spraying, what we have allocated in the past, and I think that's part of what that $80,000 was, is that we went out and privately contracted with someone to spray areas that weren't sprayed.
That's correct.
So I think, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cobbs, but I think what he's asking is 5,000 may be enough to cover the initial amount that the state identified? Do we need any more in the event that we find other areas beyond what has been identified at this point?
I actually had a meeting, and myself and the clerk had a meeting with the state regarding that, and when he just said, he barely saw enough to count the block that he did, but he wanted to make sure, up North Jersey, it's starting to get a little more prevalent because they have a lot, Pennsylvania doesn't participate in do gypsy moths, so they have a lot of transfer from Pennsylvania up in the northwest portion of the state in that area. But down here, they're not seeing it yet, so that's why they do the surveys every year. They go out and hit those hot spots, and he does not see any other areas that have any amounts of egg masses at all at this point. I would say let's wait until next year. Let's see how this spraying does, and look at next year and get out there and really see what the survey looks like. And that would be the year that we would start to cautiously watch it.
So we're pretty comfortable with that number. Part of a good budget, as you know, is not only making sure that we can cut out any of the sand that may be hidden in there, but also making sure that we have enough budgeted where necessary, so we don't have to, do budget transfers at the end or go for emergency funding.
Gypsy moth spraying though is one of those things where there's only a limited window of time you can spray. It's like the first 2 weeks in May. So, but by the time you budget transfer and do it, it's almost it comes and goes so fast. The window that you can take it, that I wouldn't see that need.
Okay.
Next is sports and recreation. Their expenses have gone up slightly, but they have seen a lot of projects and whatnot. Shore protection, that budget line, it has increased slightly as well. Last year, we did reduce this line, the amount that we pay Stockton, because we were involved in a beach replenishment that we felt was, we didn't need the services as much, but that line now has increased this year. So we expect to need that beach monitoring a little bit more.
Excuse me, Mark, that would cover you for 2 surveys during the year, as well as their annual summarization for the survey.
All right, well, I'm gonna maybe look at this and I'm gonna ask some of the same questions that I asked last year. We have an ongoing beach project now, which is, I guess maybe our benefit project for the follow-up after the storm. Will there be a survey associated with that? And I'm looking at our actual spend in 2014. Where are we here? We were at 35.7, we're budgeting 50. I'm sorry. No,
That was in
excuse me.
15.
No, that was in 15. We budgeted 57, or I'm sorry, we spent 57 and 14. We budgeted, I guess, 35.7 last year. We spent 1,400.
That's correct.
But that bill, I think that bill just is coming in. I believe.
We have,
I remember talking to Rose very recently about that. It may even be on tonight's bill list.
We also had an increase in actual expenditures from 5 to 18,000 for other expenses. What was that? That wasn't surveyed, was it?
If you looked at 2015 appropriation versus the actual 2015, I think is what you're talking about. Right?
Yeah, and then you're back to the 5,000 appropriation from almost 19,000. So, these numbers seem a little skewed.
we do actually have, there was another $18,000 invoice that came in, probably within the last week or so.
Was that just maybe mapped wrong into other expenses? Does that tie into that number, 18,677?
The item that line right above the 145050.
Yeah, I'm sorry, 18, yeah, they are reversed.
Okay,
They are reversed. The 18,677 is what we paid Stockton. Those
Gotcha.
numbers are
and
reversed.
the other expenses was the 14.
Correct,
Okay,
correct.
So Paul, let's get back to that. And then if the actual expenditures for Stockton was 18,677.31, was expenses paid by the Army Corps for some of the surveys that we might normally do?
No.
Because there's a big jump between, it's not a big jump. We allocated 35,700. We spent, let's say, 19,000, and now we're appropriating 50,000.
Right, because when you look at his proposal, it's essentially $18,600 per survey. So it includes 2 surveys. The reports, the interim report is $3,000, and then the final report is another $7,300. And then he puts a contingency of like $2,000 in there to cover meetings, or if we have a disaster declaration where we need him to come down. Though with us being in the with the Army Corps at the engineered beach, we don't need his services as much in those situations now.
is 50 the right number there, I guess is my...
But yes, if you look, we have a proposal in your notebook, you'll see the Stockton tab. There is a proposal in there from Stockton. And it's just under $50,000, so that's where that number is coming from.
Okay.
And the reason why you still, even though the Army Corps does, they program in an annual survey, sometimes if they don't have the budget money to do their annual survey, it might not happen for an additional year. So it's better to always have the surveys done so you can watch for events as they start to happen. And it's better to catch it earlier so we can notify the Army Corps if we see a problem happening.
The next line is beach protection, our beach patrol line. Again, salaries have increased slightly, and then their operating expenses have increased slightly as well. Community center, there is a salary line in here for community center. That's a new line this year. You had talked about a part-time or some part-time help. So that is in there. I know nothing has been decided on that, but that's where that number is coming from. And then there are other expenses that stays about the same for the electricity, heat, things like that. Uniform construction code, that stays about the same. Now, you'll see a slight variation because we did shift. There's more operating expenses here because we have a shared service for the secretary, so that's a little bit of a shift there. Zoning, planning, they basically remain unchanged.
It looks like it's been pretty constant over the past 5 or 6 years.
Zoning Board of Adjustment, the same. Board of Health, that remains about the same. Dog regulation, we actually saw a slight decrease there. Our county fees are not as much, so we see a little cost savings there. Celebration of public events, that line did increase. The Hobie's been putting together those events, and so that line has increased slightly. Compensated absences remains the same. Our drug and alcohol testing, now we do see an increase there because our vendor for our drug and alcohol testing is also helping us put together safety handbook and whatnot. So that has been an increase there, and that's the explanation. Streetlight, that's basically about the same, although you see it increase slightly with each year.
You may want to, you're actually under appropriating that. If you do that, and you want to add any streetlights during the year based on requests, that means you got to do some transfers into that potential line item towards November.
What did we do this year, or I'm sorry, in 2015? I think it was 1, possibly 2 streetlights.
Yep.
I believe there was one.
$700 or something it cost us.
Now they're closer to $1,000 to $2,500, depending on how far they are from the transformer box. And that's just the installation cost. That does not include the monthly recurring cost.
I tend to think it's something we could probably absorb.
I
I just mention it.
I think it can be absorbed. As long as you don't have an exorbitant amount of requests coming in, I think that cost can be absorbed.
Can we go back to the accumulated absence? Is that something that we
Yes.
paid up or something? Why?
Yes, what happens there is typically we budget $100, but at the end of the year, if there's additional money in the budget, we will transfer into that line and then move it out. I have a separate fund for accumulated absences as employees retire or leave. So that's why you see the little bit of difference. Last year I had...
No, but I'm just looking at this because in 2014, the actual expenditures were $30,100. Last year they were $20,100, and we only have $100.
That $30,000 or $20,000, that's what I was able to move into that line, transfer into that line at the end of the year. I typically only budget $100 in there.
But it looks like that we appropriated in 2015, 20,100.
That actually reflects a transfer. When you
Oh, I see. So you're saying after November, we put what was appropriated because that was done as of November when it was approved as a change in line item.
And that's something that I remember doing in prior year as well. We have some surplus, that's where we put it to
Okay.
kind of offset it.
Then we move to the insurances. Our liability continues to increase. Workman's comp, health insurance, all those lines increase. We see it, we've seen it over the years. And then we get into our grants. We have our municipal alliance grant, the same amount as last year. We have our deferred charges for our revaluation, for our tax maps, our beach replenishment. Here you'll see our down payments on our beach replenishment, our interest that we paid on our band. We made a payment on our multi-purpose bond this year, so these are all our deferred charges. Pension, you'll see the pension line. That has increased quite a bit from last year. But it's the bill we get from the state, and that's our obligation to pay that to the state. Social Security, that remains about the same. Unemployment remains about the same. What we need to budget for those. And then we get into capital.
Before we go to capital farm, help me understand what drives that pension. Is that a formula that the state?
Honestly, I'm not sure. There is a percentage that the state will give us. It's generally a few years behind. I'm not sure how they calculate it, but it's a large spreadsheet that we get from the state that shows all the municipalities in the state and what their obligation is to the pension system. So there have been years, although it doesn't seem like it's going to be this year, we have seen a year or two where they give us one number and then it's been reduced, but I haven't seen anything. Usually we would see a reduction by now, so.
Okay. So this is basically a number that we're billed for. There's no.
Correct. There's no negotiating it.
It's based on the number of employees.
It's based on the number of employees. I'm sure there's actuarial figures in there as well. But it's just something we're billed. It's not anything that we can change.
If you update them on a regular basis, if employees leave or does that change these numbers at all?
I don't believe so. Historically, if you look back, it doesn't usually change it. So I'm not really sure what drives that number. Like I said, I can go online and get percentages to see, a rough idea of what the percentage is. The last number I have, it's almost 12% per employee that we pay. 12% of the employee's salary that we pay.
Well, with the time set aside for our meeting kind of running out, we're getting close to being up against the start of our committee meeting. One of the things I think that we would have to look at and look very closely at it as we get into next week's meeting, the next workshop, is taking a real good look at our 5-year capital plan. I saw a couple iterations of it come through. I think we need to do a little bit of a better job with it. Mr. Pearson came up with a very nice schedule for planning out capital. If some of the department heads need help putting that into an Excel spreadsheet form, we'll get you the help to do it. But let's see if we can get that put into, kind of a staggered 5 to 10 year plan and look what our appropriations are going to be going down the line. I think there's still some work to do there. I think there also may be some opportunity to look at some of the capital items on the wish list that are maybe a little bit lower on the expenditure end and seeing if there are some items that we can find a way of just tucking into our operating expenses. So before we discuss capital, let's maybe take those things into consideration.
Next time.
I would suggest that maybe, because the hour seems to go relatively quickly, why don't we do 6 o'clock if we do the meeting like, we've been doing. So the next meeting is when?
The 22nd?
22nd.
So if we do it the 22nd, we can do 6 to 7:30 and give us a little extra time. All right, so in an effort that we can stay on schedule with our regularly agendized meeting, could someone make a motion to close the workshop portion?
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Cogan?
Yes.
Mr. Pearson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Garfield?
Yes.
Mr. Aaron?